And officially, good morning and welcome to everybody who has joined the call today. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy Thursday for this call. I think we have some good information to share, and hopefully we will have some great conversation. We will be doing something just slightly different today in that I have a video that I would like to share. So those that are on the phone, if you're able to jump online, I think that would be helpful, although you don't need to see the video to be able to understand. It's just basically a presentation that I'm sharing. So if you're not able to jump on, that's fine as well. I think you'll get the intent of the video once you hear it. So, but that'll be just a little bit later. Before we get there, why don't we start with program wins and challenges. Anybody in the last week or two have any wins in their business or anything that they've faced that they would like to share with the community and possibly get some help with? Just a reminder, some of you are on mute, so if you're talking, you need to unmute before you do it. I really feel like I'm talking to myself today. Any wins? Any progress? Any challenges? How about personal wins? I'll share one. This is going to be a long call. My personal win is that I think I've shared with most of you that my middle son graduated from high school this year. And one of the things that I like to do with my kids is create opportunities for special memories, especially to celebrate milestones. And so I am taking my son Keith on an Alaskan cruise, and we leave to drive from here to Seattle on the 29th, and then we actually board the ship on July 1st. And as I was planning that with my son, we, of course, like to do excursions to explore and see what's out there. And one of the excursions he decided he wanted to do is a zip line over the forested areas of the area that we'll be in on a particular day. And that sounds like fun to me. I'm have a little bit of an issue with heights, but for the most part, I'll do just about anything once. And so I went ahead and I booked that excursion for myself and my son. And as I was doing so, I noticed that the zip line has a weight restriction. You have to be 265 pounds or lighter to participate in this particular excursion. So when I booked it, I told my son, one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to waste this money and my son is going to have a great experience without me, or I'm going to get serious about my health and I'm going to drop some poundage so that I can actually join that excursion with him. I don't know how many of you have seen me or remember me from the times that we've met, but I was pushing about 300 pounds when I made this reservation. I am now down to 272 pounds with 2 weeks to go, basically, 2.5 weeks to go. So my personal accomplishment is that I've been very successful in improving my nutrition program, increasing my level of exercise, and I am feeling much healthier and more energetic and more optimistic that I will actually get to zip over the tops of the trees in Alaska.
That's awesome.
Anybody else have any wins or challenges they would like to share before we move on? All right.
So this is Mike. I just told you about this, Ben, but I was able to get a friend to go to an experiential weekend and cover his costs, not just myself, but with some friends. And so coordinating that was first time that I've been able to do that and put that together. And it looks like he's going to go. So happy about that.
That's excellent. I think that whole concept of serving and giving to others, you know, I think is just phenomenal. So congratulations. Last call for any Windsor challenges in your business or in your personal life. All right, so we will move on to the first major agenda item, and this is actually a TED Talk that I'd like to share with you all. And the title of the talk is The Happy Secret to Better Work. And the reason I'm bringing this into our discussion is really ties back to the many conversations we've had around a prosperity mindset, you know, really putting on that positive frame of mind and using that as a motivator. And then even on the other side of that, learning how to have an action plan for when your mindset is at a less than ideal place or when you really feel like you need a boost to kind of get moving forward. I actually came across this TED Talk and felt that it was phenomenal. It's a very engaging discussion. And I think he makes some great points at the end that we will circle back around and talk through a little bit after the video's completed. So I won't do this very often, but I really felt like this was something that would benefit all of us. So if you'll bear with me, please understand that as I'm sharing this over the video conference, you're going to probably have some periods where it's a little jumpy or the sound isn't optimal. So just kind of understand and expect that, and I think we will enjoy this together.
When I was 7 years old and my sister was just 5 years old, we were playing on top of a bunk bed. I was 2 years older than my sister at the time. I mean, I'm 2 years older than her now, but at the time that meant she had to do everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to play war. So we were up on top of our bunk beds, and on one side of the bunk bed, I had put out all my G.I. Joe soldiers and weaponry, and on the other side were all my sister's Milos and ponies and ready for a cavalry charge. There are differing accounts of what actually happened that afternoon, but since my sister is not here with us today, let me tell you the true story. Which is my sister is a little bit on the clumsy side. And somehow, without any help or push from her older brother at all, suddenly Amy disappeared off the top of the bunk bed and landed with its crash on the floor. And I nervously peered over the side of the bed to see what had befallen my fallen sister, and saw that she had landed painfully on her hands and knees on all fours on the ground. I was nervous because my parents had charged me with making sure that my sister and I played as safely and as quietly as possible. And seeing as how I had accidentally broken Amy's arm just 1 week before, heroically pushing her out of the way of an oncoming imaginary sniper bullet, for which I have yet to be thanked. I was trying as hard as I could. She didn't even see it coming. I was trying as hard as I could to be on my best behavior, and I saw my sister's faces wail of pain and suffering and surprise, threatening to erupt from her mouth and threatening to wake my parents from the long winter's nap for which they had settled. So I did the only thing my little frantic 7-year-old brain could think to do to avert this tragedy. If you have children, you've seen this hundreds of times before. I said, Amy, wait, don't cry, don't cry. Did you see how you landed? No human lands on all fours like that. Amy, I think this means you're a unicorn. Now that was cheating, because there's nothing in the world my sister would want more than not to be Amy to her 5-year-old little sister, but Amy the special unicorn. Of course, this was an option that was open to her brain at no point in the past. And you could see on my poor, manipulated sister's face conflict, as her little brain attempted to devote resources to feeling the pain and suffering surprise she just experienced, or contemplating her newfound identity as a unicorn. And the latter won out. Instead of crying, instead of ceasing our play, instead of waking my parents with all the negative consequences that would have ensued for me, And so a smile spread across her face, and she scrambled right back up onto the bunk bed with all the grace of a baby unicorn. With one broken leg. What we stumbled across at this tender age of just 5 and 7, we had no idea at the time, was something that was going to be at the vanguard of a scientific revolution occurring 2 decades later in the way that we look at the human brain. What we had stumbled across is something called positive psychology, which is the reason that I'm here today and the reason that I wake up every morning. When I first started talking about this research outside of academia, out with companies and schools, the very first thing they said to never do is to start your talk with a graph. The very first thing I wanted to do is start my talk with a graph. This graph looks boring, but this graph is the reason that I get excited and wake up every morning. And this graph doesn't even mean anything. It's fake data. What we found is if I got this data back sitting you here in the room, I would be thrilled because there's very clearly a trend that's going on there, and that means that I can get published, which is all that really matters. The fact that there's one weird red dot that's up above the curve, there's one weird in the room, you know who you are, I saw you earlier. That's no problem. That's no problem, as most of you know, because I can just delete that dot. I can delete that dot because that's clearly a measurement error, and we know that's a measurement error because it's messing up my data. So one of the very first things we teach people in economics and statistics and business and psychology courses is how, in a statistically valid way, do we eliminate the weirdos? How do we eliminate the outliers? So that we can find the line of best fit, which is fantastic if I'm trying to find out how many Advil the average person should be taking, too. But if I'm interested in potential, if I'm interested in your potential or for happiness or productivity or energy or creativity, what we're doing is we're creating the cult of the average with science. If I ask a question like how fast can a child learn how to read in a classroom, scientists change the answer to how fast does the average child learn how to read in that classroom. And then we tailor the class right towards the average. Now, if you fall below the average on this curve, then psychologists get thrilled. Because that means you're either depressed or you have disorder or hopefully both. We're hoping for both because our business model is if you come into a therapy session with one problem, we want to make sure you leave knowing you have 10. So you'll keep coming back over and over again. We'll go back into your childhood if necessary, but eventually what we want to do is to make you normal again. But normal is merely average. And what I posit and what positive psychology posits is that if we study what is merely average, we will remain merely average. So instead of deleting those positive outliers, what I intentionally do is come into a population like this one and says why. Why is it that some of you are so high above the curve in terms of your intellectual ability, athletic ability, musical ability, creativity, energy levels, your resiliency in the face of challenge, your sense of humor? Whatever it is, instead of deleting you, what I want to do is study you. Because maybe we can glean information, not just how to move people up to the average, but how we can move the entire average up at our companies and schools worldwide. The reason this graph is important to me is when I turn on the news, it seems like the majority of the information is not positive. In fact, it's negative. Most of it's about murder, corruption, diseases, natural disasters, and very quickly, my brain starts to think that's the accurate ratio of negative to positive in the world. What that's doing is creating something called the medical school syndrome, which if you know people who have been to medical school during the first year of medical training, as you read through a list of all the symptoms and diseases that could happen, suddenly you realize you have all of them. I have a brother-in-law named Bobo, which is a whole other story. Bobo married Amy the unicorn. Bobo called me on the phone from Yale Medical School. And Bobo said, "Sean, I have leprosy." Which even at Yale is extraordinarily rare. But I had no idea how to console poor Bobo because he had just gotten over an entire week of menopause. See, what we're finding is not necessarily the reality that shapes us, but the lens through which your brain views the world that shapes your reality. If we can change the lens, not only can we change your happiness, we can change every single educational and business outcome at the same time. When I applied to Harvard, I applied on a dare. I didn't expect to get in, and my family had no money for college. When I got a military scholarship 2 weeks later, they allowed me to go. Suddenly something that wasn't even a possibility became a reality. When I went there, I assumed everyone else would see it as a privilege as well, that they'd be excited to be there. Even if you're in a classroom full of people smarter than you, you'd be happy just to be in that classroom, which is what I felt. But what I found there is while some people experienced that, when I graduated after my 4 years and then spent the next 8 years living in the dorms with the students, Harvard asked me to. Wasn't that guy. But what happened, I was an officer at Harvard to counsel students through the difficult 4 years, and what I found in my research and my teaching is that these students, no matter how happy they were with their original success of getting into the school, 2 weeks later their brains were focused not on the privilege of being there, nor on their philosophy or their physics. The brain was focused on the competition, the workload, the hassles, the stress, the complaints. When I first went in there, I walked into the freshman dining hall, which is where my friends from Waco, Texas, which is where I grew up, I know some of you have heard of it. When they come to visit me, they look around, they say, this freshman dining hall looks like something out of Hogwarts in the movie Harry Potter, which it does. to Hogwarts from the movie Harry Potter, and that's Harvard. And when they see this, they say, Sean, why do you waste your time studying happiness at Harvard? Seriously, what does a Harvard student possibly have to be unhappy about? Embedded within that question is the key to understanding the science of happiness. Because what that question assumes is that our external world is predictive of our happiness levels. When in reality, if I know everything about your external world, I can only predict 10% of your long-term happiness. 90% of your long-term happiness is predicted not by the external world, but by the way your brain processes the world. And if we change it, if we change our formula for happiness and success, what we can do is change the way that we can then affect reality. What we found is that only 25% of job successes are predicted by IQ. 75% of job successes are predicted by your optimism levels, your social support, and your ability to see stress as a challenge instead of as a threat. I talked to a boarding school up in New England, probably the most prestigious boarding school, and they said, we already know that. So every year, instead of just teaching our students, we also have a wellness week, and we're so excited. Monday night, we have the world's leading expert coming in to speak about adolescent depression. Tuesday night is school violence and bullying. Wednesday night is eating disorders. Thursday night is the illicit drug use. And Friday night, we're trying to decide between risky sex or happiness. I said that's most people's Friday night. Which I'm glad you liked, but they did not like that at all. Silence on the phone. And into the silence, I said, I'd be happy to speak to your school, but just so you know, that's not a wellness week. That's a sickness week. What you've done is you've outlined all the negative things that can happen, but not talked about the positive. The absence of disease is not health. Here's how we get to health. We need to reverse the formula for happiness and success. In the past 3 years, I've traveled to 45 different countries, working with schools and companies in the midst of an economic downturn. And what I found is that most companies and schools follow a formula for success, which is this. If I work harder, I'll be more successful. And if I'm more successful, then I'll be happier. That undergirds most of our parenting styles, our managing styles, the way that we motivate our behavior. And the problem is, it's scientifically broken and backwards for two reasons. First, every time your brain has a success, you just change the goalpost of what success looks like. You got good grades, now you have to get better grades. You got into good school, now you have to get a better school. You got a good job, now you have to get a better job. You hit your sales target, we're going to change your sales target. And if happiness is on the opposite side of success, your brain never gets there. What we've done is we've pushed happiness over the cognitive horizon as a society. And that's because we think we have to be successful, then we'll be happier. But the real problem is our brains work in the opposite order. If you can raise somebody's level of positivity in the present, then their brain experiences what we now call a happiness advantage, which is your brain at positive performs significantly better than it does at negative, neutral, or stress. Your intelligence rises, your creativity rises, your energy levels rise. In fact, what we found is that every single business outcome improves. Your brain at positive is 31% more productive than your brain at negative, neutral, or stress. You're 37% better at sales. Doctors are 19% faster, more accurate at coming up with the correct diagnosis when positive instead of negative, neutral, or stress, which means we can reverse the formula. If we can find a way of becoming positive in the present, then our brains work even more successfully as we're able to work harder, faster, and more intelligently. What we need to be able to do is to reverse this formula so we can start to see what our brains are actually capable of. Because dopamine, which floods into your system when you're positive, has two functions. Not only does it make you happier, it turns on all the learning centers in your brain, allowing you to adapt to the world in a different way. We found that there are ways you can train your brain to be able to become more positive. In just a 2-minute span of time, done for 21 days in a row, we can actually rewire your brain, allowing your brain to actually work more optimistically and more successfully. We've done these things in research now in every single company that I've worked with, getting them to write down 3 new things that they're grateful for 21 days in a row, 3 new things each day. And at the end of this, their brain starts to retain a pattern of scanning the world not for the negative, but for the positive first. Journaling about one positive experience you've had over the past 24 hours allows your brain to relive it. Exercise teaches your brain your behavior matters. We find that meditation allows your brain to get over the cultural ADHD that we've been creating by trying to do multiple tasks at once, and allows our brains to focus on the task at hand. And finally, random acts of kindness or conscious acts of kindness. We get people, when they open up their inbox, to write one positive email praising or thanking somebody in their social support network. And by doing these activities, and by training your brain just like we train our bodies, what we found is we can reverse the formula for happiness and success, and in doing so, not only create ripples of positivity, but create a real revolution. Thank you very much. Milt?
Okay. Hopefully you're all still there and can still hear.
Yes.
So at the end of his presentation, he highlighted 5 things that you can do in 2 minutes every day. And this really, kind of unlocks that positive mindset, that positive mind frame, and provides for you all the benefits that he highlighted throughout his talk. And I just wanted to go through those 5 quick activities and just kind of review them and kind of get your feedback and thoughts on how you might be able to put this into practice in your day-to-day life. Again, not trying to convince you of something, but just trying to provide additional information to help you figure out how to address some of the challenges and stresses and anxiety that some of you feel in your business. I think every business owner at times faces those moments where they're anxious or they're stressed out or they feel overwhelmed. And these tactics might actually help you, in a more general perspective, maintain that positive mindset that helps you perform at a higher level more consistently. So the 3 gratitudes is just simply writing down 3 things that you're grateful for within your day. And I don't know that they have to be unique things, but just recognizing that every day there's good things happening in and around you all the time. And I really liked his point about how we flood our minds with a lot of negativity in our culture, and taking time to really train ourselves to look for those bright lights, those positive moments, I think can be really helpful, and it can really start to shift the way that you see your world. Journaling, just writing down what you're thankful for, or what others have done to benefit you, or something positive that's happened, just to keep a chronicle. I use journaling for multiple reasons. One of the things that I do is I record stories of things that happen so that I can go back and recall them and retell them more accurately when I need to. But I'm really focusing on those breakthrough moments, or those things that were really, hit me at the right moment at the right time, and what was going on around me, and how did this change my mindset, or how did this affect my mood, all of those things. So the journaling piece doesn't have to be long, but use it as a way to really focus on those positive things that are happening. We all know the benefits of exercise. We've seen study after study that shows the physiological effect of consistent exercise, and we're not talking about vigorous exercise necessarily, but a 10 or 15-minute walk, or something as simple as that can make a huge difference in the way that it affects your day and affects your mood. Meditation, we've talked about this at length in various forums, about just the concept of closing your eyes, finding a vision of some place that you feel peaceful in, or that you've had a great experience with, or that just is a happy place in your life, and just closing your eyes and seeing yourself in that place, and breathing through that, and just relaxing, just allowing your mind to rest in that place. And I really like the last one, random or conscious acts of kindness, going out of your way on a regular basis to send acknowledgments to people around you that have contributed in a positive way to your life. Caring for others, as Mike kind of highlighted at the beginning with his win. Doing things to help others who are in a difficult situation without expecting anything at all in return. And I think that is the most critical piece of this kind of an activity. Is these are selfless acts. These are things that we don't do to get anything back in return. This is just us caring for and encouraging and lifting up the people around us. So I'll pause and open it up for any comments or thoughts that you might have about the video overall, or about these particular activities that can help you cast a lasting positive change, or create a lasting positive change.
So I was, this is Mike, I was thinking about, I just wrote down some things as he was talking about the happiness advantage is there's a resilience, a practice of resilience. And I also thought about a practice of finding things that you're happy or content about, that contentment is key to this as well. So that was thoughts.
Yep, I like that, Mike. Thanks. We often see contentment as a negative thing in some regards because if you're content, you're not pushing forward. But that's not what I hear you describing, and not what I believe good contentment really is.
Well, I think the gratitudes help you get you into that grateful, contented frame of mind. You know?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks. Anybody else? What are your thoughts about the video or these actions?
I'm really glad that I'm in a good space at the moment, and kind of upbeat, and part of it is just because I've realized recently how bloody lucky I am. A lot of people around me are taking care of sick parents, and in my nonprofit groups, I meet a lot of people who are involved in nonprofits because a lot of them are coming from a place where they're taking care of a disabled child or a disabled member of their family. And I'm not taking care of anyone sick. I'm not taking care of anyone disabled. I'm working out of my house. I get to work with really nice people doing really interesting work. For the most part, I really like my clients. And, you know, I've got a really good life. And I'm so grateful. And it really has helped. And I haven't always been as upbeat and positive as I am right now. In the 4+ years I've been a TBO, and there have been periods when I've been really stressed out and really even depressed because of things going on in family or money or personal life. And boy, it is such a relief to be in a better place now, and that it really helps the coaching.
Yeah, amen. I couldn't agree more, Valerie. And I think, you know, just recognizing the change that you're experiencing in your own view, the new lens that you're looking through, so to speak, I think is really powerful. And again, I think I would encourage you to just take the time to record, you know, journal what's changed for you and how you've gone about that, so that it, you know, we all cycle, and I'm sure there'll be a time when you're not feeling encouraged or you're feeling a little down, and being able to go back and remember why you were so grateful or how you got to that point of gratitude for what you do have and the beautiful life that you're living, I think can be very, very helpful. And I think that's one of the powers of journaling if we take the time to go back and look at it again. Thanks for sharing that, and I'm really happy for you that you're at that place in your life. Anybody else? I just have one more thing to share, and then we'll move on, and that is that I'm a firm believer that we focus a lot we focus a lot of time, attention, and energy to our circumstances, positive, negative, or otherwise. We focus a lot on what's happening in our lives, and we don't spend very much time thinking about how we're managing ourselves through that circumstance. Even more so, in many cases, we have limited ability to directly change or modify our circumstances quickly, but we have every ability to change the way that we're viewing those circumstances or how we're reacting to those circumstances. And that's, I think, what was really powerful to me in this. Never did he talk about the material side or the circumstantial side. He focused on the fact that our brains operate from a position of, I'm happy, so therefore I'm more effective, rather than I need to be more effective or successful so that I can become happy. It always starts internally. It always starts with where you are, where you're at, and what you're doing to care for yourself. And that is what affects and changes circumstances down the road. So I would encourage you to just take some time. Hopefully you've written down these 5 tactics that you can use to begin to create that lasting positive change and begin to, as he said, change the lens that you're looking through into your life and the situations that you're faced with.
I think, too, Ben, as coaches, a lot of times we're going around and we're listening all day to people's problems, you know, and if you're not coming from a good place and willing to, you know, empathize with them, you know, sincerely, you're going to, you know, not be as an effective coach.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I want to jump in there. One of the things that jumps out at me is that, you know, I personally, that philosophy is very, very important to me about, you know, positive mental attitude starting from me, but it also reinforces the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is, you know, you got to get to self-actualization before you can start, you know, interdepending on other people or with other people. And if you're worrying about, you know, safety or psychology or anything below, that's the level you're at, and you're not going to be able to be present for your client if you're sitting there, you know, constantly worrying about your stuff and not being able to listen and give. So I concur with Val's view of that.
I was also thinking about how it's contagious. This happy secret is contagious.
Very, very true. Great points, all 3 of you. I really, Valerie, going back to where you started, I think we underestimate and undervalue the effect that we have on the members that we're working with. When we come in, you know, down or struggling or, you know, not in a good place emotionally, it has a definite effect on that relationship. So being able to stay positive, stay optimistic, maintain an upbeat attitude, you know, being grateful, being happy, as you said, Mike, being fully present for that member because we're in such a good place. I think that is what leads to what you just described, Mike, of that contagiousness, of that happy approach. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody who's struggling. I tend to be a pretty upbeat, pretty optimistic person most of the time, and it's very fascinating to me how people respond to that positivity and to that optimism. It's almost that syndrome of, if you see somebody laughing, I mean, genuinely laughing, it's really, really hard not to laugh because it's contagious. And we see that joy, we see that person experiencing that happiness, and our natural response is to join it. And so just keep that in mind. I think you all made great points. I appreciate your conversation. I appreciate your input. And just keep this in mind. This will be something we come back to several times, you know, over the course of our coaching and other things, just to remember to stay positive, stay focused, you know, create an environment of happiness around you, and then use that, leverage that to be a positive influence in all of the lives of the people that you interact with. All right, so just a quick circle back to the TAB sales protocol review that we've been doing over the last several weeks. You know, we identified 6 places in that sales protocol where we have activity or action or the ability to affect outcomes. We've talked about the first 4. We talked about setting appointments and keeping appointments and executing or completing the appointment and converting the prospect forward and what that means. And all of the many different ways that a prospect can have forward movement. This time I want to kind of focus in on the next step, whether that's a 22Q meeting or an event, or having a guest advisor seat, or whether that's actually becoming a member. And I don't want to necessarily talk about the tactics for how to move people to the next step, because that's basically a review of the protocol, and that can be helpful, but that's not the intent of what I'd like to kind of talk to today. What I'd really like to focus on is what do you all believe to be the biggest challenges you face in your business in creating that next step movement? So that's not just moving them forward, but really, forward movement can be a smaller movement than a next step forward in the sales process. So what do you find in your own businesses, in your own situations, the dynamics that you face? What do you find are the most challenging or the biggest barriers to that next step movement that you'd like to see in your prospects?
You mean what do you wish we would? What is our ideal next client? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking, as you think about the sales process and what you do from the moment you connect with a prospect to the moment that they make their final decision, whether that's membership, strategic partnership, or not yet. Wherever you're at in the sales process, the only way to get them to that final decision is a next step forward. Sometimes that's a 22Q meeting. Sometimes that's having them attend an event. Sometimes that's a guest advisor seat offer. Sometimes that's a membership decision. But wherever they're at in the process, getting them to take that next step can be a challenge, can be difficult. And so I'm asking, what do you experience as the biggest challenges or barriers to that next step forward movement when you're working with a prospect toward membership? Did that help?
Yes. Okay, if this is what you mean, Ben, what I find is I'm reaching my database pretty consistently. They're getting phone calls, newsletters, drip campaigns, workshop invites, and telephone calls from me. Okay, they're hearing from me. Okay, most of my database. So what I think you're asking is, why aren't they all members, or what's fixed? Why aren't they moving through the sales funnel? And what I find is, like, most of them are hearing from me. Most of them have an opportunity to meet with me all of them have an opportunity to meet with me in a low risk environment, like a workshop or something. They don't even have to be one-on-one. So the real problem is getting them to take that next step. That's usually from the discovery to the RFQ. That's where I'm not getting them. I'm not getting them to move. And I think the biggest issue, the biggest obstacle is they're wondering whether I'm worth the value. Whether I'm really going to help them move their business forward, or I'm just going to cost them a lot of money and tell them platitudes that they already know.
Right on the money, Valerie. That's exactly what I was looking for, or the kind of response I was hoping to get. So as you're thinking about moving from the discovery to the 22Q meeting, and kind of tying back to the protocol and kind of the intent of what we're trying to do with that protocol, what I've found is most of the time when there's a hesitancy to move forward because they're not seeing the value, it ties back to the fact, or ties back to the possibility, I should say, that we haven't really connected with an emotional motivator, or we haven't quantified it well enough. Does that make sense? Because the way that we communicate value in our sales process is by helping them identify those emotional motivators, those pain points in their business that are kind of holding them back, helping them understand what it's costing them and their business, whether it's time, resources, emotional stress, whatever it might be, and then helping them realize that the only way that this situation changes is if they take action. And the best way to take action is to have a group of advisors around you to help you figure out the best course of action to take. So my experience has been that when value is the question or the challenge in the next step forward movement, we need to circle back and figure out whether we've really connected with those true emotional motivators or those pain points that they're experiencing in their business, and have we done a good job of quantifying so that they can begin to see what the return on their investment might be. Any other thoughts on kind of addressing that situation where maybe you haven't created a good value proposition for your prospect? So how do we go about, what do you think would be what do you think we can do to, or what do you think works for you, Valerie, or anybody on the call, to really pull out those emotional things, those pain points? And does the quantification of that pain point, is that something that you feel that you consistently are able to do early in the process?
Well, Ben, since this seems to be you and me, okay, so I think that I am not bad at pulling out something that can touch upon their fears or aspirations, sometimes both, and talking to them in the discovery meeting. Sometimes they don't move forward, for various reasons. There's, they've got something going on in their business or their personal life, or money really is tight. Even if we were to offer the test drive, the money situation isn't going to change in 3 months. So that's a consideration. I guess it's a bigger leap. I don't know. They're on the precipice. They're hearing some good things that they like. They could make the money work, but they're just still scared of, I guess, wasting their time and money.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a fear around wasting time and effort and money, especially when they're already, as busy as they are. Usually resources aren't, most business owners don't have an abundance of financial resources that they can just throw around. So they have to make good decisions, and we have to help them make that good decision. I think one of my favorite questions, or stated in a couple of different ways, comes once we've kind of tapped into what that emotional pain point is. You know, I like the question, what is this costing you? Because I think it starts to get them to think about, you know, the impact. But another way to ask that question that I really like is, how does this situation change in the next 90 days if you keep doing what you're doing today? So if you don't make any changes in how you're addressing these challenges, what really changes over the next 90 days? Because what we're trying to help them realize is the way that they've been going about their business hasn't fixed this problem. If they could, they would have. And so if you just keep doing the same thing you've been doing, you're going to get the same results. So what's going to change? If you don't do anything, how's it going to change in the next 90 days? So one of the two of those, just to kind of push back a little bit, create a little bit of that mental urgency. I was talking to another TBO who said, you know, I know that this business owner needs coaching and needs a board to sit on, but they don't have that urgency yet. They don't see it as high a priority as I do, obviously. And so how do we go about creating that urgency? And I think the question of what changes in the next 90 days if you don't take any direct action is a good way to start creating that need or creating that urgency in their mind.
Yeah, Ben, one of the concerns with what you just said, which I agree with, by the way, is the fact that if they are operating, and I'm using Covey's quadrants, if they're operating in quadrant 1, that's their life. So you asking the question about the 90 days, you're literally trying to drive them into quadrant 2, but if they're not positioned to be able to see that that's what it's supposed to look like, they're not looking at the question the way you are. They're looking at it from quadrant 1. So they're looking at the fires that need to be put out right now. I'd love to be able to do the stuff you want me to do. That sounds great, but my life is putting these fires out right now. So I think one of the things we owe them is to help them move into that quadrant 2, and that's not just going to be, hey, wouldn't you like to fix the problem, 90 days? So that's going to be one of the nuances of the conversation, is how do you drive their vision out to quadrant 2 from quadrant 1 where they live.
I agree, Mike, and I think even in that situation, saying something to the effect, when they tell you, I spend most of my day addressing, the urgent and important things that are going on right now. I put out fires all day long. I think pushing back and saying, and so if you continue to focus on those fires in your business, how does your business get better in the next 90 days? How do you become a better business owner in the next 90 days or 30 days, whatever time frame you want to put? But I think you have to keep driving them back to the long-term picture, to your point, because they're living right now, and it's your job to kind of, it's that picture of somebody who's drowning or they're underwater, and what you do is you just lift them up so they get a glimpse and a breath of air, and then then they're better equipped for the next battle. And so sometimes as a coach, we just need to lift them up and let them take a breath and see what they should be focused on so that they can start to change that paradigm. Because I think you're right. They are overwhelmed with today. But we have to be able to take this conversation to the future, or they won't move forward because they won't see value.
I definitely agree.
Well, as each of you kind of think about your sales process, I find it helpful personally to, when I have places where I'd like to get better, let's just put it that way, I might make it a personal goal to pay attention to, or to develop a strategy around, or to be prepared for certain situations or circumstances. Think about your sales process as Valerie shared, hers. Maybe it is creating enough value to move somebody forward. Maybe it is overcoming the objection of, I just don't have time to do this. Maybe it is overcoming the initial objection of, financially, I can't afford this. Maybe it is overcoming the objection of, I just need to think about this longer. Figure out, write it down and put some intentional thought around what are some things that I can try in a conversation to address this, so that the next time it presents itself, I'm better prepared. I have a few more tools in my toolbox to be able to try to move this person forward. We do know 100% of the time that if we don't move a prospect to the next step in the sales process, they will never become a member. So this is a critical piece. This is a critical skill set to be able to develop, is consistently moving prospects forward to the next step in your sales process. All right, that was a brief conversation. There's a lot more we could spend, and we might do so in the future around particularly overcoming objections associated with moving people forward. But for now, we'll wrap this up, and next time we touch on the sales protocol process, we'll talk about adapting the protocol to you and your style. All right, and we've got just a few minutes left, and I really want to kind of go around the room quickly and see if we can share, because I think this ties in very well with what we just discussed. So we'll start with those that I know are in the room, and then if there's anybody else that has jumped on that I'm not aware of, we'll open it up to them. And we'll start with Mike Brown. Mike, what do you think the greatest value you bring to your members is?
I believe my curiosity and encouragement.
I like that very much. Yeah, coaches need to be curious. That's a great way to put that. How about you, Rick? What's the greatest value you bring to your members?
I put down active listening and questioning. I guess that's similar to the curiosity, though.
Similar, but you can be curious and still not ask great questions, right?
Yeah, that's true. Been there.
Yep. Very good. So active listening and asking great questions. I think that's fantastic. Mike Grover, what about you? What's the greatest value you bring to your members?
I think it kind of goes with what you presented during the TED Talk, is that I truly positively want them to be successful, and I think that comes out in the questions I use, my language, the engagement and that stuff. So I mean, I really, really, truly want them to be successful, and I think that comes out in me interacting. And I hate to say this, but I do have to get going. So
please do.
One of my 3 gratitudes for today is all y'all, and I really appreciate the sharing. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Very good. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you hanging on. And Valerie, how about you? What do you feel the greatest value you bring to your members is?
I think I help them look at the big picture while also being cognizant of the details. So I get them to focus on big picture impact areas, but sometimes in order to do that, you have to dig down into the numbers or the marketing results or the processes to see where the details are the problems to fix.
That is actually a very unique skill set. I think a lot of people get lost in the details and forget to keep it connected to the bigger picture, or the exact opposite. They're so focused on the big picture they don't spend enough time working with the business owner to dig in. So that's fantastic, and I think that is a great value that you bring, and probably something that I would integrate into my sales process discussion with business owners in the future. if you haven't already.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else on the line that I didn't get? Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. I think you are all far more skilled and able to help than often we give ourselves credit for. I think the value that you bring to the members that you have is always greater than what we perceive. And I think many of the people that you're working with are much better off as people, as business owners in their professional life, in their personal life, having had the opportunity to work with you. Please don't ever underestimate the value that you bring to your members. And as I suggested with Valerie, find a way to communicate that value that's unique to you and the way that you conduct yourself as a coach and facilitator in the discussions that you're having with your prospects. It's much more authentic, it's much more powerful, and you'll find, I think, that you connect with the people that you're talking to at a much deeper level and much quicker when you're able to share that value from a personal perspective. So thanks for sharing and be able to quantify that and communicate that to your prospects. All right, we are a minute or two over. I apologize for running over slightly. I appreciate your time and the sharing that you do on these calls. You bring the value to these calls with your comments and with the perspective that you have, and I am very grateful for those that share openly and willingly on these calls. With that, we'll wrap up. Have a fantastic Thursday afternoon. Don't forget about the sprint call session that starts at 3 p.m. Eastern Time today. And if you're able to attend, please jump on. We'd love to have you. Otherwise, have a great Thursday, a great Friday, and a fantastic weekend ahead.
Cheers.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah.